You signed it as Ben Shapiro. Did you just call
I am
someone?
Ben Shapiro. Why are you questioning my identity?
I see Ben Shapiro. I thought we were going to get a Ben Shapiro.
No, I mean, it's just the name that I.
That's just what you go by.
No, you thought I was the Jewish guy from Daily Wire. No, it's just the name Ben Shapiro.
By the way, are you ever going to be invited on that, or is that just too much for them?
On what?
On Ben Shapiro, on like a daily. That's beyond. It's not going to happen.
I doubt they would ever have me on there.
Yeah, me too. Well, thanks for jumping on.
I figured.
So, I wanted to get something clear because I'm watching X and all this unfold, and I think it's a really good thing to unfold. The V2 and its entailments, and these Catholics coming out and being like, well, you guys, you have bishops and people who say this too, or whatever. They say some sort of sentiment, and the difference is one's binding and one's dogmatic, and one is an individual opinion about something. But you got into, someone asks like, well, ultimately, like, if the Orthodox position ultimately says that Catholics are misdirected in their worship of God and who God is and Christology and the rest. I think you responded to someone on Twitter and you said, yeah, ultimately, like, we could have to hold that there is a true sense of who God is and true sense of worship and true sense of what the church is. And we would have to call that other thing heterodox or maybe schismatic, right? And so I wanted to get from you is just a short summary of how do you distinguish in these kind of instances between heterodox from heresy, from schismatic to then everything else that's just like straight up like demonic crazy shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a bunch of things going on that I think is causing a lot of confusion. By the way, I'm glad all this has sparked up because a lot of people are saying, hey, dude, I didn't even know Vatican II said that. That's pretty wild. Mm-hmm. So it's good to get eyes on this and people seeing what it actually says. And it doesn't matter, in my view, how many times you reread it and try to make it work. I did this all throughout my 20s and throughout the 2000s, trying to make traditional Catholicism mesh and work and be consistent. But I would say the first thing is that, like, when it says that Muslims adore and worship the one God, I was just on a space with Tim just now. I hopped in on his Roman Catholic space, and I didn't think they were going to let me speak, but they did. And Tim's argument was something like, well, look, I mean, they got some things wrong, but they get some things right, so therefore it's the right referent in terms of the intention of the Muslim.
Okay.
Well, the problem with this is that Islam, and maybe just Tim doesn't know this, and I don't mean that in a dickhead douchebag way, but like a lot of people don't spend time studying Islam. They don't debate Muslims, but when you do, you learn their position, and their position is explicitly a rejection of the Trinity.
Right.
So there's no way to make an explicit rejection of the Trinity position also accidentally worshiping the Trinity. It makes no sense. That would be, I would say, just straight up contradiction to think that the two things are identical somehow. Another way to show it is Tim admitted in the debate, both with Unitarian Jews in John 8, the way Jesus talks to the Jews, and in the case of the Mormon, who's even more specific in the terminology than the Muslim. Like a Mormon's terminology is, I believe Jesus is the divine Son of God, the Son of the Father. Like that phraseology is way closer to our belief as Christians than it is to a Muslim's belief about Christ, right? Just the phrase.
Yeah.
Right. In terms of how we interpret it. But the problem is that even though the Mormon has the right intention and technically the right phraseology, the meanings behind the phrases cancels out whether they actually know God at all. So there's equivocation on worshiping and knowing God here. There's a perhaps conceptual sense. If Vatican II had said something like Muslims have a conceptual idea of who the creator is, or that there is one creator, and we agree on that proposition or something like that. But the problem is that it says Muslims have the faith of Abraham and they adore, worship the one true God living and subsisting in himself, the creator of heaven and earth. That's the problem, is that they don't, though. because Jesus explicitly identifies in John 8 the creator of heaven and earth as Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
So if a Muslim explicitly rejects that, there's no way to make the Muslim still somehow a worshiper of the one true God, given the fact that for us, that is explicitly the person of Christ, the creator. And this is what they're not getting. And again, like in their own system, they don't believe that Eunomians or Arians or Jehovah's Witnesses or Mormons, they don't make the cut.
Right.
Worshiping God or knowing God.
So is that a political thing to try to sort of service the trend of living among Muslims? Is there something like that going on? Because
there's a lot of things going on. I mean, Vatican II's Nostra Aetate had a huge Jewish influence. In fact, there's a Look magazine article. Yeah, there's a Look magazine article.
Cool with the anti-Semitic remarks.
And the Jews were saying we had a huge influence on the Roman Church in the language of this document to make it more amenable, because everybody knows there's these sort of classic statements in Roman Catholic liturgy and theology that the Jews are cursed and this kind of stuff. So and I was just looking today at medieval Roman Catholic councils on Islam and Judaism. This is pretty funny, but the Fourth Lateran Council, which is 12 something, I'm going from memory here, they actually required Jews to wear different clothes as well as Muslims. Jews and Muslims would be punished if they blasphemed publicly. So does that sound like it's the same God? We're all hunky-dory, we can all pray together, when they're literally punishing and telling Jews have to dress different?
Well, that actually brings up a good point, because I ask these people on X, I don't even know if they're real people at this point. I go, well, okay, so do you think a mosque is interchangeable with your parish? Like, could you have Muslims come in and maybe section off like 20 minutes of the service to pray to Allah, who is the same God, they're just doing it differently? And then could you swap Sundays and go to a mosque every other Sunday and pray? Is it just as well you can do that? And I never got an answer from them for this question, because maybe to them it sounds so absurd, but it seems to be the logical consequence of the position that you should be able to actually do that. That should be fine. What would be the difference if ultimately it's pointing toward the same light, so to speak, or the same general being? Someone tried to say this, Jay, and someone referenced your analogy in the chat today, that they're like, oh, well, it's the same God, it's just a different approach. And you brought in, the mother analogy, right? Like, oh, I was birthed by a mother, you were birthed by a mother. So therefore they're the same person, they're the same being, because they both share this one general quality of pushing a body out of a body. It makes no sense. But that's why I wanted to ask you further, like, inside of Christianity, the term heretical the term itself is referring to someone who is claiming Christianity but veering off away from it, but still claiming it within the worldview, whereas heterodox or some type of schism, we wouldn't include Islam in the same category as those things, right?
No, so actually it has been many times included as a heresy. Because Islam, if you look at John Damascus, he basically just calls all the religions, even paganism, a kind of heresy, because they're a split from the original true worship of the triune God in Genesis.
So they pervert something, and that's what makes it heretical. But it's not in the because
the problem is they're making a natural theology argument from generic theism and saying something like, well, Aristotle reasoned to there being one first cause. We as Roman Catholics agree with that. That's the God that we're talking about here. That's why Aquinas utilizes in his Summa Contra Gentiles book so many of those Aristotelian arguments to prove a generic first cause. But the problem is that Islam is not just a position based around natural theology, and Muslims believe in natural theology just like Roman Catholics. The problem is that their theology explicitly rejects the deity of Christ and the Trinity.
Right.
So at that point, if you read John 8, it's the same position that the Pharisees have that Jesus is arguing with. They say who are you? You're a man. You're not 50 years old. How do you know Abraham? You're saying Abraham believed in you. And the chapter ends with Jesus saying, I am, meaning that he's the angel in the bush in Exodus 3. And then the Pharisees want to stone him for saying that he is the I am.
Right.
And so the point is that whether it's the Unitarian Pharisees, or you can use the example of the woman at the well who's a Samaritan. The Samaritans were this archetypal schismatics. They're also Unitarians. The woman at the well says, we have this tradition from Jacob. You Jews are the ones that are wrong. Does Jesus say, you are correct, Saint Fotini. Let's all come together and dialogue on our commonalities? Jesus says, you know not what you worship.
Right.
So 2 examples in scripture of Unitarian deities, and I'll give you a third one. In Acts 17, this one, the Roman Catholics all misread this, and then I'll talk about what a heretic is. In Acts 17, when Paul says, men of Athens, I see you are very superstitious, and he points to the altar where the Greeks had set up an altar to an unknown god, and they set that up in case they missed one of the gods, right? Because they were polytheistic, and so just in case there was some god that was left out that should have been honored, because they were superstitious, they literally erected an altar that said, to the unknown God. And so Paul, for rhetorical purposes, is walking through all these idols and speaking to the Greek philosophers and pagans, and he says, men of Athens, you are very superstitious. This God here that you say is the unknown God, he's the one that I declare to you. And literally Roman Catholics will sit there and say, yeah, that's Paul telling them that they are worshiping the one true God. No. It's the unknown God. You do not know him or worship him. That's the point. And that's why he preaches Jesus Christ to them. Because Jesus Christ is the true God. He is the word of God, right? So you can't divorce. There is no such thing as generic theism. There's only the Trinity. Right. That's the orthodox point here.
Right.
So their whole position rests on generic theism. And to your question about a heretic, I mean, a heretic, there are distinctions between, classically speaking, pagans, heretics, and schismatics. A pagan is a person who's had no exposure at all to divine revelation. A heretic is somebody who has aspects but picks and chooses, right? And that would absolutely mean Muslims, because Muslims have aspects of Christianity out of Arianism and Nestorianism.
Right.
Like they have the virgin birth, they have the judgment, Christ is helping Muhammad judge the world at the end of time and all this stuff. So they have these elements of Christianity, but it's mixed up with all the other stupid heresies. So technically, yeah, they're a heresy. And then schisms would be like in the early church, you had the Novatianists, the Donatists. Those are people who divide they sin against brotherly love, not against doctrine. So schismatics might have all the same theology, but they're not in communion with the rest of the church out of pride and sinning against brotherly love. So heretics err in doctrine by picking and choosing, and a schismatic might have all the same doctrine, but he's not in communion with you.
So there's going to be basically sort of like a spectrum of missing the mark, because someone asked me, well, what if someone's not sufficiently or properly catechized and they go to church and they're just unaware of like...
Yeah, this is a great question. Yeah. So another element that would help answer this question that gets missed in this is that if you notice, we're going to be debating this professor. Me and Father Deanna Nice are going to debate 2 professors actually on Cameron's channel. So Captured Christianity is going to host a debate on this, and we're going to get really into the specifics. And FDA had a really good point about this, that if you think about the analogy that's often made between when people who are defending their position, they'll say something like, look, Jimbob has a doctor that he goes to. I have a doctor that I go to. What Jimbob knows about that doctor is that he's Dr. Bobby Buffont, and he plays golf, and he's, got a large building downtown, and he's, divorced, and he's got this, that, right? So that's who Jimbob's doctor is, right? I have a doctor, and it happens to be the same doctor, but I know him by his nickname, and it's, Trippy. Oh yeah, Trippy, that's my doctor, and I know some of those things, but I know I know that his kids, and I know him intimately, and we hang out, right? So I know more propositions or facts or things about Dr. Buffon than you do, And even though we talk about the same one, we might not necessarily be referring to the same thing. That's their argument, right?
Yeah.
And on the surface, this sounds like it might work. But the problem is that God is not an entity or a thing like other things. And the Christian worldview or the Christian system is holistic, such that if you take away one of the attributes or one of the elements, it's no longer that set of beliefs. And this is why it's helped a set and set theory, or a number, a string of numbers in an algorithm or something like that, or in a list. Like if I have a list of, let's say, 10 numbers in a set, the set is one whole, right? If I take one of those numbers out, even though the other 9 still remain, right? And I compare the new set with 9 numbers to the first set with 10 numbers, are they identical? No. And so it only takes the removal of one property of the set to have a different thing. And that's what's going on with the fallacy that's going on with Muslims, and why that argument from Dr. Trent and Cameron doesn't work, is that they're thinking of God like just any other being, that if you just get enough of the properties, then you're worshiping or you know him, right? But that's not necessarily the case, which is why when the church fathers composed the Nicene Creed and they talked about the dogmas of the faith, like if you reject one dogma, you're not Orthodox anymore. And so natural theology and their argumentation is built on God basically accepting somebody who has 90%, 40%, 80%. And when Jesus talks to the woman at the well, he says, yeah, you might believe there's one God. You think it's the God of Jacob, but you don't know him. And so whatever sense in which they have a conceptual understanding of there being one God, it doesn't work. It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't get you anywhere. It's still not going to save you. It's not salvific. That's Jesus's point in John 8 to the Pharisees.
It also creates this sort of like reservation, making God like super mysterious, like fully mysterious, where it's like, oh, we're just shooting in the dark. It likely could hit the target, though. Who are we to say if someone throws darts in the dark that they might not hit the target? And as if you don't know. It's like, to me, it was so simple. I just, like, on one of those posts, I'm just simply like, dude, premise 1, Christians hold Christ as divine. Muslims don't. Christians worship the God in premise 1. Muslims don't. How could you possibly say Muslims are worshiping the God? It's like saying, like that cartoon I sent you. It was like, it's like saying that, like, some dude who picks up a troon, a dude in a wig, he's intending to have sex.
It's a great analogy.
You know what I mean? He's intending to have sex with a real woman. Yeah. He's trying, and it's like, no, they know what the position is. You either reject Christ, his divinity, or you accept it. And then, but this is where it gets interesting, is like, for those who accept Christ's divinity, then there's a new resolution in which we figure out and debate how accurate or how coherent their approach to their worship and who God is, right? So it's not like this like black or white thing. You sift out people who don't believe God is Christ is God. They're in a different category. But that's what it gets interested in, is the people who are in the pool, in the set of those who say, no, Christ is God. He's fully God, fully man. And they take on this approach. You can still obviously do debate inside of that pool now, because someone asked you, well, ultimately, Jay, if you're saying Catholics, because of some of these problems in their theology or Christology, they're actually also not ultimately worshiping the same God as
Correct.
Orthodoxy, right?
That's exactly why Orthodoxy holds that. If you make a significant enough error in the Trinity, like, you've lost it. That's the point. That's why it matters to not have filioque, to not subordinate the Spirit, to have uncreated grace. Like, that's why we don't share the ecumenist attitude. And that's why the Orthodox Church, for example, has always forbidden people, at least in the canons of the first millennium, you can't participate in the worship services of other religions, groups, sects, because the action displays a compromise of your belief. It gives the impression that oh, well, we're all worshiping the same God, as if that God accepts that kind of worship. And the whole point is that, no, only the correct faith and the correct devotion get you to the true God.
Yeah,
I mean, if that's not the case, why even have martyrs?
Yeah, what's narrow about any of it? Like, yeah, we wouldn't need that. You might not even need like baptism or anything. You need no tradition, honestly. You would just be like vaguely speaking to a general, as long as it was monotheistic. That's the arguments I'm getting. It's like, well, it's monotheistic. That means it's the same God. You're like, what are you talking, dude? People can worship Baal. People can worship Moloch. They can create gods to worship.
Yeah, but exactly. I just said this to Tim before I left that Catholic stream a minute ago. I said, look, it's not even consistent to say that it's only the Abrahamic monotheistic faiths. There's other monotheisms, and why do they not count?
Right.
Like, on what basis is it just the Abrahamic supposed one? Because there's theistic Satanists. If you're a perennialist, if you read Rene Guénon or John Hick or anybody, like, these are famous perennialist philosophers, and they are not of the Abrahamic faith per se. They're esotericists who are monotheists.
Yeah.
So if that's not an Abrahamic monotheism, then on what basis do you just arbitrarily say the only thing that counts as monotheism is what's in?
It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Then why participate? Why partake in the Eucharist? Like, why do anything like that? Like, if a Muslim is worshiping the same God as you're claiming to worship, what is this thing you're doing? At church, what are these
It's
things?
like saying that a theistic Satanist is worshiping the same God too, because he has. I mean, let's say I'm a theistic Satanist, but I believe that Set is the power that's operating in the world. He's one. He's personal. He lives and subsists. He is the creator of this world. Like, that matches up to all the things that Vatican II says that Muslims get a pass for.
So it lowers the standard of the barrier to entry, basically, for what's considered
worship
God.
and adoration.
Yeah,
like, again, like if they hadn't used the worship and plan of salvation, like, there's this ambiguous language, like Muslims are part of the plan of salvation, and then it's ambiguous enough to be like, well, does that mean that they can be saved? I mean, that's stupid, because everybody can be saved, right? Like, it's a useless, irrelevant statement. Or does it actually mean that Muslims can be saved in Islam? And the actions of the papacy since Vatican II confirm that interpretation, because Francis says all paths lead to God, right? John Paul II, Benedict, and Francis all went and prayed in mosques towards Mecca. So their actions, they have the Abu Dhabi Faith Center, right? They built that on the basis of the Vatican document. So the actions of the papacy, the documents post-Vatican II, confirm that interpretation. They don't confirm this Tim Gordon wannabe conservative traditional interpretation that it just means that Muslims get a couple ideas right. It doesn't mean they can be saved in Islam and whatever. I mean, Tim just did a thing against Ben Shapiro and Bishop Barron. Did you hear that discussion?
I didn't.
I mean, I know you're a huge Ben Shapiro fan.
Yeah, massive.
So basically, Bishop Barron, the Catholic bishop, was on with Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro said,
so basically, I keep all the laws. Okay? I keep 613 laws, and basically, I'm a good person. Is that good enough? Am I damned if from the Catholic faith?
And Bishop Barron's like, no, you're not damned. We all try our best.
Okay.
So basically, and then Tim Gordon does a stream saying Ben Shapiro could have heard the gospel. He didn't hear it because Bishop Barron failed. Bishop Barron is saying what Vatican II says.
Yeah, it's not a failure. It's consistent, right?
Exactly.
That's what you would say if that was your dogma, right? And that's the difference, by the way. People bring up, like, people have been posting me, linking me to, like, bishops and patriarchs saying similar sentiments, and it's like, well, this isn't binding. Now, who gets and how they get called out? That's not on me. Ultimately, I'm not going to put that on my tiny shoulders. But the key.
Are you going to put it under your tiny hat?
Yeah. I'll put it under my tiny hat and hide it away.
Put it up here.
Yeah. But just a point, just for the audience, like, if people bring this up, basically the first point of contention is simply, well, no, we're talking about something that's binding dogmatically in V2 versus an individual or even a collection of individuals who you could try to find and find quotes saying where they're saying something similar in sentiment, maybe not identical. It's not even something necessarily, I want your take on this, but like, is it something you even engage with, or you just say, well, no, that's not, the argument isn't whether other people inside of Orthodoxy might be drawn to a sentiment like that and whether they're right or wrong. The question is it binding to the theology itself? Is it inextricably tied to the practice and the theology?
Yeah, so again, this is like the difference between a tu quoque and an internal critique that leads to a system defeater.
Mm-hmm.
So if the debate was, if I said Roman Catholicism is false because you have bad popes, right? Then that's a bad argument because, well, I have bad bishops too, right? So it's a hypocritical argument. That's not what the argument is. Right. The argument is that the nature of the Roman Catholic system built around the Roman See, its dogmas and its statements cannot contradict previous magisterial dogmatic statements. Mm-hmm. Every Roman Catholic will agree with that. And if that's the case, then all I have to do is provide one contradiction and one defeater for that to show the system isn't what it claims to be. It's a contradictory system. And I even got Ibarra to admit that. Now, he'll never admit that there's a contradiction, but he did admit that
no man comes unto the Father but through me. Christ. Catholics say they agree with this.
So that's why if we show
but those who reject Christ also come unto the Father.
And even actions which constitute apostasy. Mm-hmm. And Aquinas, I've been holding back on this one, but Aquinas has a great discussion on what constitutes actions of apostasy, which would mean in Roman Catholic theology that you're outside the church.
Okay.
And one of the examples is, what if I prayed at the tomb of Muhammad? Aquinas thinks that is an action of apostasy.
Interesting.
He also uses the example of getting circumcised because you would be adopting the initiatory rites of another religion, namely Judaism, right? And according to Aquinas, this is second part, question 12, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Let me make sure that's right. Yeah. Those actions signify the internal belief and disposition of the person. And so that means you're leaving the Catholic Christian faith, and this is what traditional Catholic theology always held. Mm. In Roman Catholic theology, you have very similar penalties for specific sins like heresy, schism, and apostasy. There's another sin that gets you excommunicated automatically, which is procuring an abortion. So in Roman Catholic theology, there's specific actions that are not just making you a morally bad person, right? They're actually actions that make you no longer Catholic. I mean, pretty obviously,
after trillions of years of religious adaptations, dust has evolved to be the target of all the theistic beliefs.
Catholic theology, I'm not a Christian, right?
Yeah, they would have to say no. Now,
if I leave Christianity, I'm not a Christian anymore. But by their argument, I'm still.
You're still a Christian. Yeah.
It's like,
well, that's
stupid. That's what I'm saying.
That's why it's interesting. You said if you look into it, there's influence of bagel people in those doctrinal changes, right? Exactly. But that's interesting because I actually brought up earlier in the stream, like why not just include circumcision if baptism, if the new circumcision of Christianity is actually neither here nor there. Like if Muslims can be included as worshiping the true God, then surely all of the old law stuff could still be included as well. Why not include?
No, I mean Vatican II speaks that way as well. Absolutely.
It's like what is this There's no conversion being made. There's a continuation of everything as this big glob, like a globular. But then you're like, well, no, they don't include everything though. So what is this? What's the thing? What's the arbiter in your view, having studied this? What's the arbiter that's removing these other things from the inclusivity of worshiping the same God? Why is it so specific?
It's arbitrary.
Okay,
that's the first thing that Garraby critiques in the Theistic Fallacies paper is Richard Swinburne, and the guy that we're going to be debating is like a student of Swinburne on Cameron's channel. Mm. Swinburne says, "Oh, well, if you do metaphysics right, you'll come to the conclusion that there are," I think he says, I can't remember if he says 8 or 10. Mm. There's 8 or 10 obvious metaphysical statements about the generic the generic God. Mm-hmm. And it's all like Thomistic stuff. It's like, well, there must be an absolutely simple, uncreated first cause that's timeless, eternal, uncreated, non-composite. It's like, that's all just arbitrary, right? And then they're missing the point that those statements might be true, but the Christian belief system is a set of beliefs such that if you remove one, it's not that belief anymore.
Yeah.
That's what they're not understanding. And they have it reversed. It's a lowest common denominator argument. They argue that we can find an LCD of 5 or 10 commonalities that makes it the same referent. And that's the argument they were using with the doctor, that you see a doctor, I see a doctor, I know more things about him, you know less things about him. But that argument for non-physical empirical entities, because it's more like a set, and the Christian faith is a set of beliefs. Mm-hmm. And even Roman Catholic theology, if you read Satis Cognitum of Leo XIII and Mystici Corporis of Pius XII, even in those two documents, the popes say, if you depart in one dogma, you surrender the entire faith. So they're even they would admit this. Or just think about the way Basil talked about his opponents, the Eunomians, who are radical Arians. They didn't believe in the Trinity or the deity of Christ. Basil doesn't think they have the same God. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, Sam Shimon spent 20 years telling Muslims they worship the devil. Allah is the devil.
Yeah, I have a clip of it I played.
And now it's, well, but they also get some things right, so it's not. You see how silly this is?
Yeah, I mean, what was the point of against heresies? If you go back far enough, it's like, what's the point of that? If he could have just, what if Irenaeus took the same V2 approach and was like, you know what, guys, we were about to work on this stuff, right? But you know what, I figured out, we're got to be more inclusive. Now, I wanted to get from you, being that you're versed in the history, is like around the time of Vatican II, what's going on politically that, from your view, would make sense of this sort of leaning into this humanist sort of trend? Is it politically motivated? You said the bagel people, but is there more going on at the time where it actually makes sense? Not that we accept it, but it makes sense that they're thinking that you'd think this way, that you'd be more inclusive.
The Wemhoff book is a great Catholic writer. He's a lawyer who wrote a giant 800-page book on John Courtney Murray, Time Life magazine, Henry Luce, the CIA doctrinal warfare program, which is basically the CIA and the Jewish influence and interest wanted to alter and update and soften the language and the ideology of traditional Catholic theology. Now, I'm not denying that they also wanted to do this in the Orthodox world. We're just focusing on Vatican II and the Catholic domain at this point.
Sure.
But that's all declassified. The doctrinal warfare program was declassified in 2013. It's not a conspiracy theory. It's a real program. The Look magazine article has the Jews bragging about Nostra Aetate and the wording of it. So there's those things going on. And Wemhoff argues that ecumenism was so successful, and that's really what the root of all this is, because it's an Americanist, consumerist version of religion. So basically, it turns the church into a form of American soft power, because now it's a buffet style, lowest common denominator approach to the religion and to who God is. I mean, just think about the dollar bill. And it's also Masonic, right? I have a Cambridge companion to Hermeticism, and the chapter on Masonry says that one of the fundamentals of Masonic philosophy for centuries is that Muslims, Christians, and Jews are all worshiping the same generic God. It's identical to the natural theology of Aquinas in Vatican II. It's identical to the natural theology project of the perennialists, the Sophia Perennis, this Prisca Theologia. So all of those projects are not Christian projects. It's the same philosophy behind. I mean, if you look up the dollar bill and it says one nation under God, and it's the all-seeing eye, does anybody think that, well, that's the Trinity?
Right. Yeah.
No, it's the Masonic deity who is the great architect of the universe, who is he's not a creator. It's like the Mormon God. It's an architect. An architect works with pre-existing matter.
Okay, so Jay,
yeah.
are there is there this, because this is what, 60s or something, is there an outrage from a sect of well, I wouldn't be a sect, they would say that they were the true Catholics. Was there this outrage that I just not aware of, like a sort of a protest?
Yes and no. So interestingly, the beginnings of the traditionalist Catholic movement are some years after Vatican II. I mean, there were some discontents at Vatican II. There was the Ottaviani intervention, and one of the cardinals, Cardinal Ottaviani, was upset because another Roman Catholic bishop named Annibale Bonini was involved in rewriting the Latin Mass to make it the Novus Ordo of the New Mass. Mm-hmm. And he was a known Mason. And so Ottaviani tried at Vatican II to stop the Protestantization of the Novus Ordo Mass. But the new Mass included Lutheran, Orthodox, Anglican, and Catholic scholars in terms of writing it up and creating the Novus Ordo Mass, which is no longer the TLM. So the early stages, they were focused on being angry about the Mass changing. As time progressed after Vatican II, you had a missionary movement out of France called the Society of St. Pius X, run by Archbishop Lefebvre, and he began more and more to reject Vatican II. The problem is that he signed the documents of Vatican II. So if we're going to say that the trad movement is really centered around Lefebvre signed the documents. So, but then he later says, okay,
he had some regrets.
He appears to have, as time went by, he moved further and further away. And I mean, he was never Sedevacanist, but at times in his books, he actually sounds almost Sedevacanist.
But that's what's interesting. Isn't Tim empty seater?
No,
he's not. Oh, I thought he was.
No,
my bad.
No. Well, Tim keeps saying he believes that Francis taught heresy in the
How old was the girl Allah diddled?
How old was the girl Allah diddled? Someone asked, Jay.
That's funny.
6, 8.
Allah is the uncreated 9-year-old.
Yeah. The uncreated, yeah.
Allah's uncreated. Allah has an uncreated foot.
Foot did it.
He's
his foot.
He's
did
like
it.
He's an eternal Quentin Tarantino.
His
right?
foot did it. Oh man, they're gonna come after you for that one.
I forgot what we were talking about. Oh, the trad movement. I'm sorry. I don't mean to be so.
No, it's funny.
So basically, the SSPX begins more and more to kind of shift into this, I don't know, 70s, 80s, 90s to be the locus of trad stuff. Mm-hmm. But you also have other trads that you get out of Vietnam. You get Archbishop Ngo Dinh Thuc, who becomes the father of the Sedevacantists. So all the Sedevacantists, they have to trace their apostolic succession through traditional bishops that reject the Vatican II. And mainly for them, it's Thuc. So you have the Thuc line. But the problem is that Thuc was a kook at the time of Vatican II. He wanted women's ordination. He also worked with the CIA. So he explicitly, in the Doug Valentine book, is identified as a CIA asset during the Vietnam War. It's very suspicious that he goes from being an advocate for women priests at the time of Vatican II to suddenly he's the father of Sedevacantism. Right? It's very sus.
Yeah.
So, long story short, the biggest branch of trads are the SSPX. They still claim they're in communion with the Pope, but they reject Vatican II.
Yeah.
So it makes no sense. And out of them came all the other sort of trad movements except for Thuc. And that's where you get the Setas are usually people that leave SSPX for Seta. And those are very small communities. They have one seminary, but it's a different lineage. It's called the Society of St. Pius V. They have a seminary in Florida. Very small group. So the two basic branches of trads that are not into Vatican II are SSPX and then Sedevacantists. But you have a group of SSPX that were reconciled to Rome called the FSSP, the Fraternal Society of St. Peter. And a lot of the masses that go on that are still traditional Latin masses that trads go to are FSSP masses. So long story short, it's almost as splintered as like Muslims and Protestants in that world.
So, being that there's a split, obviously one is more powerful than the other politically at the world stage. But what do you say to the people? Because what I find the distinction, like the difference between being on the internet where people are really kind of focused on theology and these kind of debates, it brings out sort of like the nerd culture. But the normie culture that you and I will likely engage with habitually at our own parishes that aren't so fully enamored by this stuff. What do you say to the Catholic who just kind of like doesn't even, it's just overwhelming, right? They're going to church. They feel some sort of draw and connection.
Anna is the uncreated Selma Hayek.
Uncreated Selma Hayek. That's funny. They're just going, right? So like, without fully nerding out on them, how do you yourself, because this is usually your type of platform, but in person, the approach you would take to someone who's just like, Jay, I'm a Catholic, I don't know, I just kind of sort of, inherited this tradition and I'm doing it and I like it, and, I don't know about that shit, dude.
I just bring it back to the basics. So like, we all know that the Ten Commandments tell us that there's one God and he has to be worshipped the way that he lays out. Mm-hmm. The Orthodox Church has never changed its worship. So you can just look at something simple like the worship of God, how it's conducted, the reverence, the form, the structure, etc. Mm. If you can go to the average Roman Catholic Church, and it's less reverent than an Anglican church. Yeah, which is still Protestant. Okay, that's how bad it is. There's hip hop masses, clown masses. It's bad.
There's Lion King liturgy, I saw.
Yeah. So Mexican wrestling mass, strong bad liturgies like that.
Yeah. That's a good angle. Like I always ask people that too. I go, what would you like? Wouldn't you like to see what Christianity would look like in practice in the year 500? Like that's my elevator pitch, by the way. Like
if you go to a Antiochian liturgy, Russian Orthodox liturgy, you compare that to Novus Ordo worship, which one honors God? It's pretty obvious. Next, I would say simple things like, do you think God wants us praying together in mosques and in synagogues when that's explicitly condemned multiple times over in the first 1,000 years of Christianity, doing that very thing?
Yeah.
So that's another easy identifier. If you got a church that called crusades, it's the Fourth Lateran Council calls for a crusade against the Saracens or the Muslims, right? That's obviously night and day from.
Is this their form of reparations? Is this like a weird? It's like a weird Catholic reparation.
Maybe it is.
It's like, we did that, we know it's bad, and here we go. We're going to give you, and our reparations is you have access to our God a little bit, kind of. It's like, here's a door. Well, that's an interesting angle, because if there is that past and sort of a guilt, we're in a guilt economy.
That's a really interesting point. I hadn't even thought about like a social justice.
Yeah, social justice
behind it. Yeah.
Right, because wouldn't all that be tied? Like if you had at all any liberation theology, liberation would assume also oppression and something needs to be fixed, and that's past based. So you'd have to reference the past and be like, well, this happened, right? This is terrible. Mm-hmm. And you go, okay, what happened? Well, you can look at slavery, and that has its own form. And you look at, so I wonder if I do wonder if that, even if it was not explicit, if that it sort of informs the route being taken, almost like this like weird guilt, like it's almost condescending in a way as well, which I'm fine with. I'll condescending.
I think from the vantage point of the people who are subversive and who wanted to change the church, the various elements that are out there, intelligence agencies, the Jews, maybe even other players in the mix, like Rockefellers, that family. One of the things that Wim Hof highlights is that the Rockefellers really wanted the Vatican to change its position on abortion because they believe so heavily in depopulation. And one of the things holding back depopulation agenda in America was the Catholic attitude on pro-life.
Right.
And so Wim Hof makes a big point about that and the influence that Rockefellers had in the Roman Catholic Church throughout the 60s and 70s as well, to get them to cave on stuff. So I would say, yeah, that's and they use I'm saying the oligarchical elite. They actually utilize false guilt to guilt trip people into, like you're pointing out. Oh, you got it. You remember those Crusades?
Remember those,
I'm looking at the Fourth Lateran Council right now in 1215. Remember when you made the Jews wear the funny outfits to be identified in society?
Oh, those were the first. Wait, those were the first numbers. Those were the first tattooed star numbers. Interesting. I didn't know that. Yes,
the canons of the Roman Catholic Lateran Council in 1215 tell. By the way, this proves that it's the one that calls for a crusade. It says that Jews may not do usury in Christian countries. Summary of Canon 68: Jews and Muslims must be distinguished by wearing different clothes.
You hate me.
They may public on Passion Sunday and Holy Week.
That's actually kind of funny.
It is.
Go away into the darkness.
What's funny is that, like, those things are the things that are used in academia nowadays to say you're guilty.
Right.
You better do so. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
You better do something about that.
Yeah.
So maybe those are the conversations behind the public conversations that we can only speculate, but it kind of makes sense. You would take that approach in this social justice. Climate. Yeah, this climate is very, and it's influential. They already showed, I don't know to what end, but they already demonstrated that social justice itself had its own sort of mini legs. I wouldn't say they're long legs, but since civil rights, you can orchestrate new themes. It's almost like a show that has like
the abominable sect of Muhammad,
comedy like has its format, like a romantic comedy has its like template. Social justice has a template that you could sort of like introduce at any time, and it'll have some impact. I don't know if it'll cause a result you want, but it'll get people moving and doing things, changing their clothes and changing their biopics and donating here and there. And I think it's running out of steam, but it is an interesting way of looking at this. Like if the church tried to flirt with social justice, it's going to go real bad real quick. Like it's going to get commodified. It's going to be gross.
All the Marxist socialists, for example, utilize this sort of guilt tripping that you've oppressed everyone, right? You're the landowner, you are the noble, you're the monarchy, you're the
colonizer.
You're the colonizer. You've oppressed, therefore restitution has to be made, which is odd because, well, if there's no God and we're going to be atheists, as most like. There's no restitution. Restitution doesn't have to, why? Why does restitution have to be paid? There's no reason.
Right.
So it's arbitrary, but it's actually a weapon of control, and that's what people are figuring out.
Well, what if I guess a good indicator moving forward is if they start doing like DEI priesthood stuff, like DEI clergy.
Oh, that's actually happening.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't know this, but I think there's a reason why that movie Conclave had a trans pope. I ruined it, but it's a terrible.
Oh, did they do a reveal at the end with a shirt lift? Like
they don't show anything, but they explain it.
That would make sense. I would say that kind of subversion just happened in politics first. Like I think I'm pretty much convinced. I wasn't entirely convinced by Big Mike, but who's the French dude? His wife. I'm pretty much convinced that that's a dude. But it would make sense if that was softly, covertly embedded so that people just didn't know. Like that's even a bigger trick. Like it demonstrates that it's buyable. Like you can buy, like
even more subversive. People don't know this, but it's been hushed, but it's already a problem in Orthodox and Roman Catholic world that there are people who are trans going into the priesthood.
Interesting.
And the problem is that you can't always figure that out exactly without some sort of check.
Yeah, I actually brought that up. I thought I thought someone in the
and word is the Roman Catholics are already allowing it.
Then everyone's going to be looking at hands.
They're not publicly saying it. They're already allowing it. And I think that's kind of what the movie Conclave is getting at.
Well, the thing is, it would only be one way, right? If you maintain a male clergy, it's harder to convince. I don't know if it's harder actually if you're trying to decipher who's pretending to be who. Like a woman who's trying to be a man and trying to assume a position in clergy, like you might be able to tell that. But I'm not sure if that would be easier to tell than inversing that. Anyway, it's definitely something I've been skeptical of it all the time. Like even in orthodoxy, I'm just unfortunately waiting for some dude to come in who's wearing a veil. And I'm like, how do you navigate that kind of thing? How much do you police it? How much do you just go, well, that can't last? Like that can't actually prevail. We know that.
Well, you can't. Yeah. I mean, in the Roman, for example, I think in Roman Catholic canon law, and I know in Orthodox canon law, there are several things that disqualify you from being a priest. But the problem is that you can hide your status and even perhaps slip through.
Mm-hmm.
And the Skittles push will put pressure on Rome to eventually just accept all of it.
Mm.
So, and then I would imagine, unfortunately, elements of the Orthodox Church will as well.
DNA tests, like, show me. That's the thing.
Or if you pull down your pants and you have a giant rotting hole.
Yeah, like it's just, you're like, that's not a, yeah.
Or you have a piece of plastic hanging there. I don't know.
Yeah. It would be like a stapled thing. Yeah. It would have to be a woman pretending to be a man, which you'd pick up on some cues there. And also, like, in the end, like, let's say that happened at one of our local parishes where they were in, in the altar boy section or something, kind of like got smuggled in or something. And it was like ignorant, like nobody checked. It was really the parents doing something deceptive. To what extent, the reality is eventually that'll come to light, right? And be dealt with, as opposed to, well, how much do you pry in and make sure it's not happening versus, okay, it's just like, for instance, you trust people when they approach the Eucharist, that if they partake, they're baptized. Not only that, but they prepared for it, right? You can't actually in real time. There's one element you could ask, which is, your servant, what's your name? What's your saint name? Like that's a kind of a passcode in a sense to getting in. But you could just lie, so people can lie about that. I think I've witnessed it, honestly. That I was like recently, I was like, that didn't go right. Like if they were in the church, they wouldn't be so confused about what's happening right now. So they just basically kind of lied to the priest and took the Eucharist. What do you do about that? I'm not sure. For me, in my position, I certainly there's nothing I can do about it. But I
think that, like from the vantage point of taking the Eucharist, like the priest and the bishops or the priests and deacons do the best they can to know. Every case I've ever been, like they want to know who's taking it. So, I mean, is that infallible? No, I'm sure there's been somebody who at some point has wrongly or inappropriately taken the Eucharist. Right. But in the Roman Catholic world, it's very different because after Vatican II, they allowed communion in hand, which means you could just grab the host. And somebody actually went viral on social media a couple of days ago. Some chick just goes up, gets the Eucharist and puts it in her purse. And it went viral because traditional Catholic faith is about Vatican II, that you can just take the cracker, because it's supposed to be put in your mouth like the Orthodox Church,
right?
By the priest, that you're not supposed to touch it,
right?
So, but the difference here is that the reason this matters is like you're probably thinking, well, there won't be that many trans people trying to become priests. There's already people at Roman Catholic seminaries in Rome doing this. And the difference with Rome, for example, is that it's pretty well known that most in America, a large percentage, I would say probably over 50, are gay. Roman Catholic priests are gay. And so this is another element of the LGBTQ plus world, that if Rome does start allowing trans persons to be priests, it's Pandora's box. Not only that, it, in their system, even, like, unless they change or update, which they probably will, it also, everything that person does is invalidated. They're not you can't be a priest. So it's all invalid in their view. In Orthodox view would be too. So basically, they would have to say everybody's marriages, everybody's baptisms, all the Eucharists, the church itself, it's all fake.
Right. Even if it was corrected, like if V3 self-corrected, but it wasn't a conversion, like a repentant conversion to Orthodoxy, everything before that would still be in question. It would be like, well, it even demonstrates more arbitrary position if it could just be different. It's like science. It's like evolution. If suddenly evolution, if like suddenly the view was no longer dogmatic and like rigorous, and it was like, oh well, it turns out that was all false.
Well, this is the same point. Yeah, this is the same point that we make with the death penalty, because Pope Pius V, who's the Pope of Trent, mandated that gay priests should have the death penalty put upon them. Well, that would knock out most of the American priests if that they would all be. I mean, I'm serious. But now Francis and John Paul II say that the death penalty is contrary to the gospel. So how can you have centuries of the death penalty by the state? In fact, the Lateran Council that I just mentioned, Fourth Lateran Council, says the state punished heresy as a civil crime, and in some cases death. The state, the Catholic state, right? Fast forward to now, the death penalty, right, is contrary to the gospel. Yeah.
Wow. So it's changing, and what I'm trying to reach is like the sort of more lay person who's just kind of floating around and doesn't know the problem here that you're going to have to confront, not just V2, but everything else you talked about, and how to effectively, without being like a douchebag about it, which is difficult for me, moving them over and going, you know what? I think it's time. Like, I think there's a moment here because you've opened the box again. I know you've been harping on this for years, but now that it's on Tim Pool and now it's getting a little more publicity, the ordinary person is getting a taste of what's going on and like what are these problems, and maybe they heard of it but they never confronted it, and so now it's the opportunity is like, how do you get them into the life raft over to the island?
They're gonna have to probably go through a dip. You've ever seen that bell curve of the traditional Catholic?
So you go down first.
There's a meme of the traditional Catholic bell curve where you start and then you kind of get up here with
currently drawing honey from my beehives and listening to Jimbob.
You're like a conservative normie.
Today is a
Scott
good day.
Hahn, and then you kind of like start going down here and you're Taylor Marshall, and then you're down here and you're like getting more SSPX. And then you get Mel Gibson.
Mel Gibson, yeah.
Then you get Sedevacantis, and then whoever made the first meme. Then they put me. So the final stage of Tradcat is Orthodox.
And then that's funny. Yeah.
I think point being of the meme is that there's going to be a process that people have to go through and see themselves. They're probably not going to do it overnight. I didn't do it. It took me years to get through this stuff. But what happens is that people that are serious about Catholicism, you're going to think that it's the church of, it's the church of the church fathers. And when you go to your local parish and try to live and experience that Catholicism, and you run into all of these hip hop mass, modernity
coming in.
But even stuff like, Karen, who runs the parish council, you're going to notice that it's the feminist lesbian fake nun that actually runs the local Novus Ordo church, not the priest. So when you confront all this stuff and then you find out that your trad ideas are not welcomed, those are usually the things that are the breaking points for most people.
Yeah.
Right. They can hear all these arguments and they can see all this, internet articles and books and this and that, papal documents. But when they want to go to the Latin Mass and their bishop shuts it down, that's usually the stuff that's the deal breaker.
Interesting. Yeah. So there's a big, this could all go very well, honestly, because as ecumenism infiltrates orthodoxy as well, and you get all these like impulses to be more charitable, to all these ways of life, and don't you want people a part of the church? And it's like, well, yeah, but there's a condition, there's a conditional statement there if you want to be a part of the church. So I think maybe if it's highlighted enough, if it's clear in the headline that this is what happens when you pursue this ecumenist view to its full end, this is what you get. We thought we did that with just like general Protestantism and all of these like wacky churches that are a dangerous loaf of bread. Like this stuff should be enough. That was enough for me to be like, no, there's a true church, a true tradition that's preserved. There's only two options that I explored that were possible, and it was Catholicism and Orthodoxy. That was the only choice. Like everything else, I was like, no, that's not even on the table. But for those who are caught in between the two, Catholic and Orthodoxy, maybe they'll see more clearly that this is what the fruit is of it, right? And so do you want that for Orthodoxy? Maybe those people with the ecumenist sort of impulses inside Orthodoxy right now will see this and go, maybe we should turn back. Like this isn't right. This is not going to go well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree.
So anything else you have coming up, sir? You're doing all sorts of spots.
Oh yeah, actually I have a bunch of things coming up. So Luigi and I will be on Elijah Schaefer's show in the next couple of days down in Boca Raton. Next week, Father Deacon Ananias and I will be on Cameron Bertuzzi's Capturing Christianity channel to debate Dr. Trent Doherty is his name, and then another guy named Christopher Tomaszewski, and he's the Thomist that Dr. Bradshaw debated several years ago on Suwan Sona's channel. I think it's called Intellectual Conservatism. He's an Asian Catholic guy. I forget where he's from, but so we'll be doing a 2-on-2, and it's about this issue. So those guys are going to be defending Vatican II's documents from the vantage point of the doctor argument that you heard me make earlier, or repeat from them earlier, that Jimbob has the same doctor as me, but I know more facts, and so it's still the same doctor.
Right.
So we're going to have to try to argue and show how that doesn't really work for the reason it doesn't work is like, it would be like Jimbob saying, I explicitly reject Dr. Buffont. And then I'm like, I go to Dr. Buffont. And so we have the same doctor.
Yeah. That's more.
I mean, that's the.
Yeah. Speaking of who's presenting the analogy, you know that Capturing Christianity is doing a call out tonight. I assume you knew that because you have a set up debate or talk with him anyway.
Yeah. So Cameron told me that they're going to call out tonight me and make the statement about what they think the defense is.
Okay.
And then FDA and I are going to debate, not Albrecht, but Tomaszewski and Doherty next week.
Interesting. That's going to be awesome. I'm glad that this is getting more traction and highlight. And one more question for you. If you were to pick a leading sort of Catholic voice or YouTuber or whoever it is, whatever you get to pick, who would you think would have the most impact if they did convert to Orthodoxy?
I'll give you two categories. Most impact in terms of numbers, maybe somebody like Matt Fradd, because his channel has gotten pretty big.
Is that the beer guy?
Yeah, but I think he's at like 500,000 subs now, so maybe Matt. And the other thing too is that Matt has tried to cater to Orthodox and Eastern Rite Catholics, because all the pop apologists except for Tim Gordon, they all go to the Uniate churches, which are same as the Orthodox services basically.
Okay.
So none of them go to the Novus Ordo.
Interesting.
I mean, it's funny, right?
It's like
Because they're all
they like don't want to, but they're like, I'll get everything from it, but I won't. It's almost like a pride thing. I can't just move over and say, you know what, I'm not the Pope. I'm not the guy.
Yeah, and it's also a money thing because in the case of Shamoon or the big Catholic channels,
Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allah.
Like there's a much larger market share if you have apostolic Christianity and you appeal to everybody, right?
Yeah.
There's a much larger market share if you're Roman Catholic. So it's damaging to their pocketbooks, I think, also, which is a factor that we should include here. That's a big thing that people overlook. Anyway, but ideologically, who would have a bigger impact? I don't know. Maybe one of the. Well, that might be a double-edged sword because Richard Swinburne was a big Thomist, and he became Orthodox. But then he tries to make orthodoxy Thomistic. So
he didn't.
Maybe
really
we don't want their academics.
Yeah.
To be
Well, I always think about that. I'm always like, I get excited when like more famous people start talking about it and whatnot. Like, who's the guy who did the Hitler dog joke? Like, I think he was on his way to converting. Like that's
the comic comedian.
Yeah,
guy,
Count Dankula.
Count Dankula.
Yeah, I thought that was cool, and you get the makeup chick who's all gothy and stuff. But then I'm sort of like, also I get this worry where it's like I'm almost glad. I'm not glad he's not a part of the church, but I'm glad that his Russell Brand didn't jump into orthodoxy and then sort of pervert it in his like sort of wacky sense. I was glad that was he was a Catholicism he chose in that sense. So I'm a little bit hesitant when we start looking for the shiny people to
Good day, white ones.
Yeah.
Trying to get baptized down in the river.
Yeah, so in my undies. Yeah, in my skivvies. Yeah, he's now the guy. Like he can't help it. He cannot be the sheep, the humble sheep who's quiet. He can't just. He has to, you know. Yeah, that's always. I'm always looking at that because all the circles we're in, this term influence. I'm always I'm joyful and also skeptical when bigger people take it on because I don't know how they're going to reflect it.
Rapture.
You know.
What
well,
are
did you
your
see
best
so
arguments
interestingly,
against
Elijah
that,
Schaefer today
outside of it being non-historic?
Shared Ben Shapiro just met with Pope Leo. And then Elijah Schaefer, I mean, I think he's being funny, but Elijah Schaefer was like, okay, I guess I'm going to be Orthodox now.
That's funny. Yeah. Yeah. Well, maybe. Yeah, maybe. You never know. Like people are definitely looking at it. They're like hawks circling it, but they're just not. Oh, yeah. Look at this. Like he's tall. Wait, he's taller? He's taller than him?
Somehow, apparently.
That was like 3 inches. That was like 4 inches.
Unless he's standing on like
step
a
on my
booster
stool.
seat.
Step
he's on a booster seat.
Yeah, dude.
Ben Shapiro was like,
I will meet.
Yeah.
If I get.
He's like, he mandated that he gets a right to stand on a stair stepper.
Totally. He's like, I will meet. I have one condition. It's gonna sound weird. A marble step stool. They're like, we don't have a marble one. Marble or nothing.
It's like it's got little dreidels.
Yeah, like little dreidels. Yeah, it has a little blue star he steps on. Take that. But yeah, that's wild. Yeah. Anyway, anything else? You got anything tonight you're doing or streaming later?
I probably will stream because I mean there's so much crazy stuff going on, and I'm really having fun getting into the Rothschilds and the history of Israel and like how they founded it, and Iran, Iraq, 7 nations, Syria, like all that stuff is. I find it fascinating. I think a lot of people just don't really care, or they don't know, or
well, it's just so granular. Like people can't, even myself who's interested, I can't digest every moving part of it the way you would present it. I would need like tiny sections. Jay, you need like basically like
maybe that's actually a good idea. Maybe I should do like little individual snippet videos of like just specific things.
Yeah,
that's a good idea.
Like even if it's like 12 minutes, that's good.
Yeah.
But people get overwhelmed, and I'm interested and I get overwhelmed. So it just shows that even someone who's interested and wants to learn that, it's good just point. Dude, it's so much to try to get in. But anyway, that's on you.
Well, I want to say, man, I listen to your streams regularly, and not to puff you up, but like
do it.
I think you're doing really good debating. I'm really impressed with the how quick you are at seeing and analyzing people's arguments, and you're doing great, man.
Thank you.
It's impressive.
Well, I learned from the meanest person on the internet, but I don't know. Andrew might have you beat. You might be the night, like the Andrew arc might be really good for you, because now Jay's all hey guys,
now I'm the nice guy.
Right. Like, hey guys. But it is true, like you're now getting invited on places that were scared of you, or thought you were just like a dick, and now it's cool. You're going to be able to talk to Cameron, who said no to you for, I don't even know, 5 years straight or something. So maybe you're actually getting nicer in your older age. You're getting a little
good point. Maybe
slow, moving slower and golfing.
Be honest with give me an objective appraisal here in terms of the Tim Cass situation. Even if you just saw clips, like my memory of the event was like all three of us were loud and interrupted.
Oh yeah, no. I thought it was spirited between the two of you. The fact that he let you onto an X space shows that he also knows that this is a spirited thing. I thought the funny part about it, like I thought any level of aggression or assertiveness was totally fair. What I thought was funny is the leftover guy who just had it almost showed like in a great way that like, okay, this is a debate ultimately between these two proclaimed churches. That's it. Historically, the succession, it goes to this third guy. You can swap them out with anything. They'll never be able to compete in that. And I thought you guys being aggressive to each other was good, because the third guy couldn't actually make a position. Like he didn't even have the confidence to be upset about misconception. He was just like, I think they should do that more. They should throw in that third wheel, like just take a Mormon, and so it's Jay against whatever the leading Catholic person is, and it's this ongoing debate, and there's just third wheel who's just like, guys, it's like raising his hand, guys, can I just tell you about sola scriptura really quick? You guys were like, no, you're definitely wrong, right? That's what I got from the debate, was like, it was either you or Tim, and that's the battle. You're the true representatives of the only two competing possible options. And
also he admitted, like, I don't really know much about these theology terms. It's like
the third guy or the third guy?
No, the Protestant guy, the Lore Lodge, the Mason guy. He's like, I don't really know much about like Anglican theology and history. And it's like, well, why are you here to debate something you don't know that much? Just like it was a weird idea that he wanted to come to debate, defend Protestantism when he's new to Anglicanism. I don't know. I just thought it was bizarre.
Well, most of them don't even dive into church history at all, right? So they're not gonna, like, it's actually essential to their position to not go further into the past. It's almost like no, I will not. And you're like, can you go back 500 years? And they're like, okay, maybe I'll do that. And then you go, oh, can you take one more trip back, right? And they're like, no. You can't go there, because you know what it forces them to do? It forces them to come up with terms like radical Orthodox Protestantism, or Cliff Netchell being like, I'm an Orthodox, or people are using the term more and more now, right? Because they know, oh shit, I have to somehow put my Protestant view in the year 500. How am I going to do that? How am I going to possibly transport this back then? Well, it's impossible. And I think they know it. I think they know it's impossible. Now they're just kind of like waiting to be, maybe they're waiting to be nicely crushed. They're like, well, Jimbob, now that you did it nicely and you were nice about it, I'll consider it. But I don't know. I get frustrated with these types. But anywho, thanks for jumping on. I appreciate it. Soon we'll come up with a topic. I want to jump on your channel sometime soon.
Yeah. Let's do that soon.
And
we'll be back next week, and most of next week is booked. I'll also be doing some shows with Jim Jatras, and then I think the week after that should be pretty freed up if you want to do a stream.
Awesome, dude. I will. I'll text you. Okay. All right. God bless, Jay. See you. Thanks for jumping on.
You too, man. Later.
See you.